One of the important things to remember during the cell cycle is that it's really driven because cell size is limited. Now, cells can actually continue to grow really until, they can continue to grow if they really wanted to, but there becomes a point when it's just the cell becomes so large that it's unmanageable. So the cell has to be able to get things across its diameter, across the entire cell. And if that cell is too large, it takes up way too much energy in order to transport materials across the cell. So volume actually increases faster than surface area. So that might sound a little bit weird, but if we look at this, so in this first column here, we have a cell. Obviously, it's a square cell, which doesn't really happen, but it has lengths of 1. Okay, so 1 whatever. It could be nanometers, it could be picometers, doesn't really matter. It's just a length of 1. Okay, so if you use the surface area formula, which is length times width times the number of sides, you get that the surface area is 6. Okay, so that's basically taking the area of a square with sides of 1 unit and then multiplying that by the 6 sides of a cell, of a square, a cube. Okay, so you get 6 square units. Now with the volume, it's length times width times height. Each of those is just one unit, so it's 1 times 1 times 1, so it's 1. Now, if you do the ratio of the surface area to volume, you get a ratio of 6 to 1. Okay, so you've got quite a bit of surface area compared to volume. Very, very little volume. Okay, now if you just double the length of each side, okay, so now you have a cube with a side of 2 units instead of 1. Okay, so you've got 2 times 2 for length times width, 4. You still have those 6 sides, so 4 times 6 is 24. Now with the volume, it's 2 times 2 times 2. Okay, length times width times height, so you have a volume of 8. So the ratio now becomes 24 to 8, or 3 to 1. Okay, so the surface area has decreased relative to the volume by quite a bit. It was 6 to 1 here. You had much more surface area when compared to your volume. Now, volume is a lot closer to the surface area proportionally. Okay. Now, if you increase the length of each side even more, okay, length times width times number of sides, so it's 3 times 3 times 6 now, you get a surface area of 54. Okay. With the volume, though, length times width times height, it's 3 times 3 times 3 is 27. 54 to 27 also equals 2 to 1. So now we're at a 2 to 1 ratio between volume, or surface area and volume. So you can see that volume is actually increasing by a cube root, and then the surface area isn't actually increasing that much. Okay, comparatively at least. All right, so we went from 1 to 8 to 27, whereas with surface area we went from 6 to 24 to 54. Okay, so this is just showing you that the volume is increasing a lot faster than the surface area is, and so surface area and volume for a cell have to be in this kind of balance where there's enough volume within the cell in order to do all of the things that the cell is supposed to do, but it's not overwhelming the surface area, okay? Because the surface area is where the cell actually contacts its environment. It's where it picks up its nutrients. It's where it picks up cell signals from other cells, where it gets its messages from the brain, all different kinds of things like that. So if the surface area is too small compared to the volume inside of that surface area, then the cell might pick up a signal, but because the volume of that cell is so large, it'll take way too long for that signal to get from the surface of the cell to where it actually needs to be. Okay, so then you've got this delayed response, which is never a good thing in cells. Okay, you always want the response to be as fast as possible. So surface area has to allow for adequate exchange of materials. So it has to be large enough surface area that it has that room to kind of push things out of the cell, take things into the cell, do all of that exchange. Otherwise, the cell isn't getting anything inside of it. So it's not getting any glucose, any nutrients, and then it's also not getting the cell-to-cell signals or the signals from the brain. Okay, which means that the cell is basically just kind of sitting there and hanging out and taking up space for no reason. So cell growth is coordinated with division. Okay, cells that must be large have unique shapes in order to increase their surface area. Okay, so when the cell is starting to get too big, that's when the cell starts saying, okay, I need to cut myself in half to deal with this issue, right? And so that's why it's coordinated with division, right? Now, again, the cells can create different shapes in order to increase their surface area and basically keep the volume kind of at a constant. Okay, so that keeps the ratio between surface area and volume as high as it needs to be. Okay, so for example, blood cells, red blood cells, they need to have a pretty large surface area because they have to contact inside the lungs, they have to contact the tissue that will exchange oxygen and carbon dioxide. So they don't have a lot of time to do that. So they need as much surface area contact with the issues, or with the tissue, not issue, where that exchange can take place. Okay, so that's why they have kind of a weird looking shape to them. It also helps them get through blood vessels, okay, and they don't get stuck easily. Then you also have neurons. So neurons are some of the longest cells that you would ever see. Okay, they have kind of the cell body, which is this like larger pillow-looking thing here, and then they have all of these little branches that go off from them. Okay, so they have a massive surface area compared to their volume, but they actually can move things relatively quickly through all of this. They also use a mixture of not only chemical signals, but also electrical signals. So that's a little bit different how they work. And then you also have skin cells. So skin cells, they have these weird shapes and they also are layered on top of each other. Okay, and that really helps them with, protecting the living layers that are underneath. Okay, because skin is organized a little bit differently. The top outermost layer of your skin is actually made up of dead skin cells. Okay, the layers underneath those are the living cells that will then eventually die and get pushed outwards. Okay, so the skin that you shed, okay, so all of that skin that goes on to make dust, because yes, that happens, that is actually already dead. Okay, a lot of what is on the outside of your body is actually dead cells. So like your hair is dead, okay, your fingernails are dead, right? They actually get pushed outwards because they are there as kind of a protective sort of thing for you. Okay, interesting little weird side note there. All right, so cell surface area must allow for the adequate exchange of materials, but the cell cannot be too large. Okay, if the cell is too large, you can't get the contents to the surface of the cell quickly enough in order to be exchanged in the time that is necessary for all of these different contacts to happen between the cells. If the cell is too small, it can't actually gather enough nutrients, components, anything for its actual function. Okay? So there is a lot of balance between how big the cell is, its surface area, how things are moved around inside the cell, how they're taken in from outside of the cell, all different kinds of things. So there's a lot of balance between all of that. Okay, and thankfully your cells know how to do all of that, because that is a branch of geometry, trigonometry that we just don't want to get into. It's annoying. So anyway, all right, so that is the end of this section. So there you go.